This is the EnT podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us. Hello, everybody. It's Matt Stranick, part of the EnT crew here with the podcast, and we are absolutely stoked in our series of EnT conversations to have Dave. If you're in the field of ed tech or learning technology, whatever our field is, it's kind of impossible to not know or be around Dave. This is what I have noticed in some way. And just what I mean by that is just, it seems like Dave Cormier has had a hand in just a lot of things that have just really gotten a lot of traction, gotten a lot of attention, and plus just stuff that we don't even know about. Ostensibly, we're here to talk about his excellent new book, Learning in a Time of Abundance, produced by John Hopkins Press, right, Dave? Yeah. And I've got some questions to speak to that, but honestly, those questions were written simply because I know we could go down a whole ton of rabbit holes. I know for sure that I could. So I just kind of, we'll have the book questions to keep us on track, and then where we end up, we end up. So again, just really thanks a bunch for being here in the first place, sir.
Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. So on your website, it's davecormier.ca, right?
.com.
Pardon me. davecormier.com. You have on the intro page, who is Dave? And as I've kind of alluded to, it seems like you've had your hand in so many different projects and initiatives. I guess for those who might be checking out the program from outside the sphere of learning technology or whatever. I mean, who is Dave, and what are you kind of about as an educator and human?
I appreciate that. Just to sort of clarify the Dave has been around things, think of it in the Forrest Gump sense, where I just happened to be at a lot of locations where interesting things happened. So like I was at the first learning analytics conference in Alberta in 2011. I didn't do anything useful there, but I was there when a whole bunch of those learning analytics things started. I just happened to be in the room, and frankly was arguing against what they ended up doing anyway. But I've been teaching for 25 years now. I went out to teach English abroad because I wanted to travel. I'd never taught before. I had no intention to, and after the first week, I was like, uh-oh. I think I've got a thing I like now. And sort of, I've been a bit of a vagabond, both from that having been in a couple of interesting conversations since, but also I've worked in government, I've worked in universities, I've worked in colleges, I've worked in K-12, I've taught in kindergarten, I've done comms, I've done student retention, I've done a lot of project management and sort of change management stuff inside of schools and universities. And so I've gotten a chance to see a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. Have made a lot of really dumb mistakes over the years, but I feel like I've had a chance to see an awful lot of it. So that's kind of where I'm at this point.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. And again, yeah, I mean, just from the work, I guess I became most familiar with your work while I was doing my doctoral research into the MOOC phenomenon, if we're still allowed to talk about MOOCs or use that term. That's not considered antiquated or pejorative or if it doesn't out me as being like uncool. But I mean, honestly, I really felt like what you and colleagues, Siemens and Downs, and for sure your awesome partner as well, right, Bonnie? What you kind of articulated and expressed through practice, I think, with the connectivist courses and the investigations subsequent into those. I mean, I think it really opened it up right around the same time that like music streaming was sort of opening up, when video streaming was sort of opening up. I sort of see it like okay, it's sort of education has landed into this paradigm a bit, right? And it was really so. And I mean, I know that you subsequently moved on into other areas. So one thing I just wanted to ask is that something else that I've kind of become aware of from the academic or ish kind of standpoint, as kind of running into your work with the book, is the notion of rhizomatic learning. Rhizomatic or rhizomatic?
As you will. It just depends on accents. I'm good with either. I say rhizomatic, but I don't think there's a definitive.
So first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate your generosity there. And the other thing is, first of all, is that a going concern, I guess, for want of another term? Is that sort of, and further, because I know that you sort of had, I believe that there was a public sort of open course dedicated, several, right? And there was even like cohorts of people who kind of went through that. And so I just wonder, did that sort of lead into the work that you ultimately started working on within your book? Or is that sort of like, are they like separate but not of a different cloth? Do you know what I mean?
I would suggest that the book is a knowledge translation of that rhizomatic work. So I spent 10-ish years talking about rhizomatic learning and talking about how we look at things that look at learning from a decentralized perspective, where it's not sort of the pushing back against the linear mastery education sort of approach, where there's a set pattern, a set path, like a linear narrative that we're supposed to follow when we either teach or learn. And rhizomatics was meant to sort of stretch that out a little bit. But I found that I was spending most of my time trying to explain French postmodernism to people, which was not what I was trying to do, because it comes out of some French postmodern thought from the 70s and 80s.
That is good information. I did not know that. That is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so it comes out, the term rhizome itself is being used in the sense that it's done in Deleuze and Guattari's Thousand Plateaus. And so I was writing about that and trying to also do the knowledge translation at the same time. So I'd be in a talk and I'd be talking about French postmodernism and practical classroom application. And it was too much. I was doing too many different jobs at the same time. Once it became almost impossible to run sort of what became called connectivist MOOCs, when it became really, really difficult just because of how the web changed and how people's interactions online changed, and it became very difficult to sort of have safe spaces for people. They got much more aggressive. I started thinking about how I could have the same kind of conversations without getting into having to explain the sort of background. If people are interested, I'm more than happy to go, well, I was founded on all these business. But in reality, it became clear to me that it wasn't necessary. And what I could do is just talk about something like uncertainty, which is another way of talking about sort of what I was talking about in rhizomatic learning, but in a way that's much easier to approach, where it hit people in a place that they already were living. It was able to talk about the same kinds of things, the things that are important to me about how we face uncertainty and how we avoid things like problem solving and the idea that somehow all questions have answers, and the same kinds of things I was talking about before, but in a way that's hopefully, the book is really story based and is meant to be really approachable for somebody who is not in the field necessarily. And my favorite conversations about the book have been with, like, one of my favorite ones was with a local woman here who is one of my friend's mothers and also a friend of mine, who was talking to me about how she read the book, has no academic background really, but how it struck her as related to a lot of her personal experiences. hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. We are subject to the whims of the sometimes sketchy basement maritime internet. Sorry, sir.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's a Camtasia edit right there, and that's okay. But where before the network sort of lagged on us there for a couple of seconds, you were discussing sort of the notion, which I really appreciate, by the way, when I was diving into the Kindle version of your book, like how much you related it to personal experiences,
Yeah.
and how you grounded it in a narrative kind of approach, which,
Yeah.
I mean, that is something which, when you read an academic book of sorts or something about learning, I mean, that's just so seldomly there. So I just like to say that from a standpoint of making knowledge more shared and available to people outside of our area, that's something that your approach in how the book is written, kind of comes across, which I think is really awesome. I wonder, because you mentioned in the foreword that it took something to the effect of 4 years from sort of start to finish on this project. I guess would you be able to say, from a writing standpoint, what components of that kind of took longer, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. So I originally thought, following the Martin Weller example, for those of you who don't know Martin, check him out.
Yes, he's great.
Yeah, so I thought I would just be able to take a bunch of blog posts and pull them together and write a book. I could not. That is not the case. It's not in my case anyway. I was not able to do so. So I took in a bunch of blog posts and put them together, and I was like, that's not going to work.
Okay.
And then I started writing. That was like a couple weeks, and I just looked at it and I was like, no. So then I started writing. I did like 1,000 words a day for a long time.
Whoa.
And I got like a lot out, because I can write. The average blog post length on my blog is 1,000 words. If you look back through, it's ridiculous how close they hit to 1,000. I don't know why my brain is built that way, but that's my normal writing number. So I did that a lot. I think it was like 5 or 6 days a week. I did that for a while.
Whoa.
And I pulled together enough to send to the publisher. And I'm really lucky with the publisher I got, because they were willing to let me do a peer-reviewed book that doesn't look like your regular peer-reviewed book. And that's really what I wanted to be able to do.
It's great for that, personally. I think it's filling a gap, if I'm, just that aspect of it.
I've been talking and communicating and interacting with my community for 20 years now.
Yeah.
I don't need to convince Alec Kuros of the positions that I'm taking up. Alec already believes what Alec believes, and we agree and disagree on the things we disagree on. But that's not who I tried to write a book for. What I wanted to do was take the stuff I've been doing for years and write it for all of those. I had 5 or 6 different people in my head. My sister is one of them. People who I think are impacted by the things we talk about, but are always approached in ways that don't allow them to engage in the conversation.
Right.
And that's not because they're dumb, and my sister is certainly not dumb, but it's that she's a judge. She just does different things. And so I wanted to write something that would give her a chance to see a window into the things that I care about, that I think are impacting our culture, but in a way that could actually be certainly approachable to read and hopefully entertaining to read.
Well, again, I mean, with Weller, right? You made some good examples, because when you look at like, for instance, his latest metaphors for EdTech, or his previous, his sort of historical survey, 25 years of EdTech.
25 years of EdTech, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, the conversational quality of it really lands. And in this country, and by this country I mean Canada, North America, whatever, that's just something that's been absent. So, I mean, if I may, you sort of, to contextualize just a bit for the historical record or whatever, you did, you started out your academic-ish kind of work based at the UPEI, right, in Charlottetown?
Right, back to Canada, yeah. So I spent 5 years abroad at various colleges and universities.
Okay.
But in Canada, I started at UPEI when I came. Oh, actually, that's not true. I spent a year at Holland College first.
Okay. And like, sorry for not knowing this aspect of your bio, but I mean,
It's
you're
not written
from
anywhere.
Atlantic, Canada originally, right?
So I'm from northern New Brunswick.
Okay.
My parents were lobster fishers, so I
Awesome.
grew up on boats in a town of 350 people in northern
Whoa.
New Brunswick. That's 350 people over like 20 kilometers, like in a tiny little town in northern New Brunswick. And then school in Halifax for the first degree, and then spent a lot of time abroad. Came back, did masters, and then worked at UPEI for several years, worked in the government in PEI, so the Department of Education there, as a sort of special consultant for a couple of years, and managed the med school here for a year in Windsor when I first got here, and am now in the also Office of Open Learning as a learning specialist for random things.
And thank you for that. And I mean, again, I just, for the benefit of people who might be encountering this in ways where they're not going to be able to just scope your LinkedIn profile, because we're trying to get this out, you know, in the format of the podcast.
Yeah.
I think similarly, you know, in a way that kind of invites people from outside to kind of check it in. And you had that really poignant anecdote about your father, actually, in the introduction to your book, right? Which, again, I just feel like, okay, this is, I mean, I even screenshotted it for you. I'm just like, this is something that differentiates this. So, I mean, in terms of then shifting from the Atlantic Canadian context into Upper Canada, to Upper Canada, I mean, just apart just from obviously different roles and you know things associated with your personal life, I mean, can you sort of describe clearly for those who don't know, the Office of Open Learning U Windsor is actually one of the top open learning units, I think, in Canada. It's safe to say, in terms of influence, scope, and you know, just a wide variety of really original work seems to come out of you know what you and your colleagues seem to be doing and have done over the years from within that unit. I mean, I became aware of it back when I was at Ontario Tech University back in 2015-ish, and it always seemed like you guys had your stuff together in a very creative, interesting way through that office. And I guess I just wonder, you know, what's that like? What's the context like for you now? And I mean, you're also involved in doctoral study, so I wonder, you know, how the juggling act goes between the professional responsibility, you know, the doctoral work, which is, you know, a huge thing in and of itself, and then plus, you know, finding time for the research and practice which inform your authoring kind of works. I mean, how's that all going for you, and particularly within the Upper Canadian context, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who does the kind of work that I do has been on the march of sadness for the last 18 months, right? So Gen AI has kind of taken over our lives. And so I'm going from shop to shop inside my university, sitting down, talking to people, and mostly just expressing care.
Okay.
Because, and that's so before I came here to Ontario, I never had a job that actually had the word learning in the title.
Okay.
So I was involved in learning, but from a lot of institutional perspectives, and a lot of the research I was doing was outside of my day job. So it was mostly separate. So the MOOC stuff I did, the early MOOC stuff, I was managing a communications team at the time. I wasn't in a faculty position or a learning specialist role or any of those things. I was very much working off the side of my desk.
Okay.
And here I'm doing more like what an educational developer would do, though I wouldn't call myself one. And so in terms of the research stuff, it's an awful lot easier now because the stuff I'm writing about and the stuff I'm doing are actually the same.
Okay.
So yeah, that's gotten easier. In terms of the book, I mean, a lot of that got written while I was between jobs. So I finished at the med school, and then before I started in the Office of Open Learning, I had a 6-month window. So I got a lot of the core pieces of writing done during that time. And in terms of the doctoral work, it struggles. Because I mean, I'm an alt academic, right? So I'm somebody who has been running their academic career without supervision for my whole life. My whole professional career has been without supervision. So I wrote my first academic article in 2008, like
Wow.
published my first academic article, and I still don't have a PhD. And so I wrote a peer-reviewed academic book, and the constant question I get is, "Oh, was that based on your doctoral research?" And I'm like, "Nah, haven't really started it yet." So for me, everything's a little backwards because I've been engaged in a conversation with my peers, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was somebody's like, "Yeah, you know what? I need to hear more about what you're saying. Can you write this down somehow?" And so I had that question a couple times, and there are lots of people who had no interest in what I was going to say, did not want to read anything. I'm not suggesting that it was like everybody was chanting for it, but there was some desire to engage in that. So I've done a lot of my work just that way.
A continuation of an existing dialogue, sort of, as it were, building up for decades, as a matter of fact. I think, to be honest, I mean, our field generally is one that sort of can tend to value that. I mean, it seems like in the ed tech sphere that people come to it from so many different standpoints. Like English teachers, it seems like there's a lot of former English teachers who end up in these roles. At my time at TRU, I mean, that was clearly the case. And there's just, so it seems that people just through various career transitions or academic, initiatives kind of end up, and it's one of the things that makes it, kind of an interesting spot. Practice, if I'm being honest. It's kind of, you go to the punk concert or the whatever, and it's like, oh, well, you don't know who's going to be there. It's
no, I agree.
And that's
sometimes literal punks. Jim Groom's around. You've got like,
I've heard much about Jim and interacted not much, but the amount that I did, I was quite impressed. It was
the legends are true.
He does live up to the significant myth around him, and
a super sweet guy, like a super nice person as well.
And so we're talking with Jim again, somebody who doesn't come from like a strictly academic background whatsoever, but yet he's been practicing at a very significant level within higher education, just because of the nature of what he does affects so many people, just because of the infrastructure that he kind of brings and his sensibility and approach, right?
Yeah, I'll flip the argument on you just a little bit. I think partially one of the things I saw in government was just how many good people out there are working, like how many smart people there are in different fields. And I got a chance. Thing about being in PEI is that you almost end up on 5 national committees simply because they need a representative from every province. So you end up with a lot more to do, like a lot more fun stuff to do working in a small province than you wouldn't say in Ontario. But I think part of the reasons why we know so many of these people is just because we hit at the same time as the technology did. So we had a venue for the things that we were saying that my colleagues who were doing really cool things with food conservation just didn't have as part of their daily practice a way of getting their their sort of voice out there. So with EdTech, I mean, we all had Twitter accounts in 2006, and we all could host our own blogs, and we all could all of those things that allowed us to communicate. And also, when you think about it, I mentioned a bunch of old white dudes. There was a sort of sense in which we thought our voices were important because we weren't even old white dudes then. We were young white dudes then. And there's sort of this whole other layer of privilege on top of that too. And when I talk about how things broke down in 2014, 2015, 2016 on the web, you see that actually harmed a lot of people who were marginalized to begin with. It was the marginalized people who were being attacked. And so whether they be sort of women or people of color, or so I want to make sure that that's clear.
That's awesome. I appreciate the critical self-interrogation, self-reflection that you are expressing there, relative to the privilege of male white dudes, middle class, educated, just kind of running things like we've always done. Definitely, certainly as I get older and further into my career, I made a point of seeking opportunities to sort of interrogate my own privilege, and, you know, at least be self-aware, even if I can't, you know, divest myself of, you know, born advantage, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I appreciate, you know, that you are bringing that standpoint into the book and into your work as an educator. I don't want to, you know, keep you too much longer, but I have to say, you know, if I can just sort of flash back, I was part of it on the notes. I was almost going to do like my own personal Dave's greatest hits, you know, like here's the top 5 things that I'm aware of, you know, that I think are cool. I still might do that, Dave. It's not even going to be to embarrass you. It's just, you know, for my own amusement. But one of those significantly is the series of videos that you prepared for the sort of the pivot. I don't like that term, but right, the emergency videos you did, because man, like, I was feeling unsettled and vulnerable, and I know everybody was. I mean, really, to one extent or the other. And you know, it's like we're now like post pandemic or whatever the heck it is. But I mean, that's just, I sort of look at that and I go, those videos are like, okay, here's some practical knowledge in a timely fashion. You get to the thing, and that was where it's like, okay, educational technologist plus educator plus somebody with a standpoint into how processes and systems work. I mean, that to me was a very clear, articulated, well-expressed example of some good, timely online teaching. I mean, I'm a fan of that, if I can say.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So I guess then, just in terms of other, you know, projects, I really wanted just to ask you, because you've put forward this conference, right? This uncertainty conference. So speaking of past uncertainty and now dialing into contemporary uncertainty, which is a serious theme really within the book. So does the uncertainty conference, as it's envisioned, and there's links and all that, folks, in the WordPress page, which you'll want to check out for this. But I mean, do you see it as continuing on the dialogue that's been started in the book? Or, I mean, can you just sort of speak to the what the impetus is for this?
Yeah, so it's all part of the same process, right? So for me, I got a chance to host a conversation with a book, which is kind of the way I thought about it. I got a chance to sort of, I can talk all the way through and say all the things I've been meaning to say, and then people can take it as they will. And for me, the confronting uncertainty is the thing we need to help students to do more than anything else. The thing I think is most important in the work that I'm doing right now. It's still kind of rhizomatic, but it sort of all kind of flows together. But what I wanted to do was 2 things. One, I feel like the loss of Twitter really, I lost a lot of the structure of the community that I had.
I'm just raising my hand, Dave. I'm just raising my hand. I'm sorry, but loss of Twitter. Okay. Like for me, Twitter and I didn't really mesh that well. And then I just kind of stepped away from it. And then about 6 or 7 months later, Musk swooped in and it turned into completely whatever it is now. I noticed that you still have an X account. I noticed that you have LinkedIn. I noticed that you got Blue Sky. You're on Blue Sky.
Mastodon, all of them,
So are any of them an acceptable thing?
No. So in my career, there have been 2 pieces of technology that really worked. Facebook groups. As much as I hate Facebook as a platform, their groups worked so effectively at the time because they did notifications properly. And if you're trying to work with some of those courses we had like thousands of people. And if you're trying to work with emerging communities of thousands of people, you need to have a way for those people to hear that someone else is talking in a way that controls identity, which Facebook does actually really well, and that it allows people to come in and come out of communities. And Facebook groups was great for it. So I love that. Twitter, was the first of the sort of bigger platforms that allowed you to follow and not be followed, and allow you to make connections or follow a thing without connecting to a thing. So you could be aware of someone without them having to know you, and they could be aware of you without. So it allowed you to do one-to-many communication that allowed things like MOOCs to work, right?
One
So
to
it
many.
allowed you to get, what's that?
One to many.
It
Right.
allowed you to do that one to many, right? Like you could say, hey guys, here's this thing that's happening, here's a whatever, and it did a really good job of that.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, we were using things like Skype and the little mood messages in Skype, or how we were communicating back and forth, or you had people who are connected through their web rings, but all those things required you to know all kinds of different things. Whereas with Twitter, you could come on, follow a movement, and get involved in it, which had huge repercussions around the world for a lot of different reasons. But I love Twitter that way. And with it not working anymore, I'm missing some of that. I've lost a lot connection to a lot of friends. And well, this time I'm looking to also have one of those experiences where I meet new people who I've not been working with. And so far we've got, I think I've got 50 people who have registered so far.
Cool.
About 20 of them have volunteered to speak. And some of the things they're volunteering to do are blowing my mind and totally not what I expected.
From outside North America as well, or
oh, totally.
like
Yeah, definitely. So like Viplav Boxy wrote in from Delhi. He's got something he wants to do. I've got a couple from Australia who are interested. Some other people from other places, but these are communities that I kind of have from different things. But also, I'm getting new people I've never heard of, and that's the nice thing about LinkedIn, because I'm getting new sort of perspectives. So we're talking about uncertainty in publishing. We're talking about uncertainty, like death at the university kind of stuff, uncertainty from a student perspective, and people are coming in with really different sort of thoughts than the ones I thought were going to get volunteered. So I'm really excited by some of the new perspectives that I'm seeing.
awesome.
And we're going to do 2 days of that conference on the 16th and 17th of July. You guys are welcome to participate. But then we're going to do 2 days of sort of a workshop, summative, after party kind of thing, where we're going to look at an after party. We're going to look at all the notes that we kept, because they're not presentations, so they're like a 5 to 10 minute piece that someone does, and there may be 2 or 3 someones, because I'm seeing some places where people would be really good together, and then a facilitated conversation after, where the people who are attending are going to be involved in sort of an engaged conversation, all the while doing live note taking.
Cool.
And then we're going to take each of those live note taking pieces on the next 2 days and try to pull them together into the format that emerges, uncertainty being what it is. I mean, I'm holding my arms up right here. It's called ShrugCon for a reason. A lot of the time you're just kind of like, and that's, I think there's something really powerful about that. There's a whole thing about the history of problem solving and how it's impacted our culture. There's a Rand Corporation argument there. There's a whole bunch of pieces that are involved in that. And I think that we have been obsessed with solving problems, and the vast majority of the problems that are important to us are not solvable. They're only problems you can impact, make a little better. Like, you can have impact on them, but they don't respond to being solved. And if you look at the history of how this has been formed in education, you look at the writings that people cite, and I don't know if they don't read them or if they don't care, but when you read those original articles, the original problem solving articles, they were trying to do 2 things. They were trying to build AI systems that would beat chess players, and they were trying to copy problem solving methods from the digital examples they had from Rand Joniak. So they were trying to make our human problem solving systems more digital. And you read it and you're like, what? Like, I mean, okay, I can understand why you thought that in 1958. Like, I get it. But these are the people we're still citing, which at this point, like, that's madness. Like, that's clearly not what we want to be doing. But it's still, when you look at the things that are cited in educational theory, it all goes back to those guys. For the people who are believing in problem solving, that sort of rigid end of design thinking, not all of it, but a lot of it on that side. And so what I'm pitching, and what we're pitching, I guess, this sort of loose knit group of people, is what we really need as a culture is to be prepared to deal with uncertainty. We need to be able to learn how to decide when there's no right answer. So we need to learn how to decide, not because we have manipulated the input so we can get a right answer that we can blame on someone else, but accept that things are uncertain, apply our values to them, and then do the best we can, which is what real life looks like, and not what our schools look like.
Well, again, in terms of like a fully social learning experience, I mean, I hate to say I wouldn't expect otherwise from you, just kind of giving your past initiatives and whatnot. But I mean, really, the opportunity still exists for people to submit to participate. Totally. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good. Well, we're going to be sure to have the submission links placed for that. Again, people are invited to come from outside, quote unquote, traditional post-secondary environments. People are welcome from other sectors, other areas of the public, I take it?
Yeah, the only rules are basically the brave space rules. You have to be pro-social with people. You have to be nice to people. You can disagree with a point, but you're not attacking people. Like, it's
okay.
The rules coming in are that you need to be nice. And I don't mean nice like you have to follow the sort of whatever perspective I take up. Like, I don't care about that. But as long as people are polite, as long as people engage pro-socially, I love to hear what people's perspectives are.
Just be nice about it. Social approach. Awesome.
Just be nice about it.
That is some good ways of carrying oneself generally. But you know, go figure, right? That is great. I want to be respectful of your time, and also just, you know, to kind of start on the downward trajectory here. So uncertainty, the conference, it's going to be the party that you didn't know that you needed this summer, but it's going to be rad. So for sure, we're going to be speaking to that and hyping it again as we continue to put out more of these episodes.
Thanks,
the book, folks, is just absolutely phenomenal in terms of an accessible conversational read, in terms of something that brings in really relevant historical examples as well, from a whole wide variety of areas. And it just really marks Dave as somewhat of a intellectual omnivore, if I could put it that way, which, you know, in terms of practicing both within education broadly, even, you know, apart from the learning, design, or technology or whatever area. So I'd just like to say thanks a lot, man. Really grateful for you to be here. Was there anything we didn't get to that you'd like to sort of shout out or speak to in terms of the book, the career, anything you're involved in, anybody you want to shout out?
There's nah, I'm on the spot. There's a lot of really good voices out there that I think we all need the reset. Those of us who are from my ilk, at least. I try every year at least to do something that makes me really uncomfortable and that I don't know how to do, to remember what it's like to learn about something that I don't know how to do. And I'm trying to reach out to new communities and get out of the spaces that I've been in. Not that they were bad spaces, but find yourself something that makes you uncomfortable, that leads to that uncertainty. It's advice that I got, and I'm always happy to pass along. So maybe I'll just leave that there.
Awesome. Learning should not necessarily be comfortable. Lean into the uncertainty, I think, in a proactive, pro-social, you know, I dare say even constructivist kind of manner.
Almost like we've been pitching this for 200 years.
No kidding. Dave, it has been an actual slice. I appreciate it so much. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'm going to end the recording now. This will be available, folks, later today, within the next few hours, through your various social media channels and any other way that you can share a hyperlink. Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, man.